So we will take a look at the homework first. For the literature, how do you find this type of article, right? Easier to read, right? More fun to read, easier to do the question. So let's have a look. So see how did it go with you, like with the questions. So for the literature, again, right, just quick review of what we talked about last week. That's the roadmap, right? That's the instruction you need to, when you read the article, you need to follow. Oh, that's something actually I want to talk a little bit more as well. So when you read a literature, right, just consider that's a movie. You're watching a movie. So you are you are sort of like you are the actors, you are the audience. So you read the stories, you watch the movie from two perspectives. So you are the audience. So when you read everything, try to create that kind of scene, visualize that in your brain without, again, right, adding too much details, or just stay with the literal meaning, the words. And also you are the characters, right? You are the actor. So you play the role of the characters based on the script that you have. So focus on any cues in the articles that signify the feeling, the attitude, the emotion, right? The personalities, everything about the characters. So that's the things that you also need to focus on as well. That's more accurate, again, right? And it actually helps you better understand the character, not just the literal meaning, but really get to know the character based on, again, still just based on the literal meaning. So I clarify and repeat this again and again. Stay objective. Don't make any personal judgment and bias. So think about, like, sometimes when people watch a movie, right, like just personally they are making a comments like, oh, that doesn't make sense, that's not logical, that's impossible, right? Don't do that. All right, when you do the SHA articles, don't do that. Just keep quiet. All right, just watch the movie. All right, accept whatever they offer you, and just based on that, understand that, that's fine. And then, like, the logic of in the literature article, they also have a logic. Whether that makes sense to you, whether that's your logic, doesn't matter. Okay, so you need to respect the character. Every character have their own logic, their own emotion, right? Their own behavior, their own reasoning. So you just need to follow that. But most of the time, you should be able to make sense of that. So try to be empathetic. That's what I'm saying. All right. So the emotion, for the logic of the article, right, for the characters, usually is the emotions and the feeling of the character. Again, so follow through the character's feeling. That's very important. So we mentioned before, right, the plot, the events, that's less important than the actual feeling. Action, that's not less important than the feeling and the thoughts. So those internal things, that's more important than the external in the physical world. And then, like, the develop the story, of course, you still need to be aware of that, right? But again, more importantly, you need to focus on the emotion and feeling of the characters. So something happened and how that made the characters feel, that's more important. So, and when it comes to the questions, you need to be more careful with the purpose question and the inference question in the literature. Why? Because compared to the other type of articles, in the literature articles, this kind of purpose question and inference question, they have more interpretation and inference. So if you look at the answers, sometimes you will find the answers that's not mentioned in the article at all. All right. But compared with the other choices, That one just makes sense. Remember, like the suspense, right? It creates a sense of suspense. That's a purpose question. So that's a very typical literature articles question on the SAT. They ask about the purpose of that paragraph. So you need to be very, so in order to avoid making the mistake in that kind of questions, very importantly, you need to be open-minded, right? So you need to be open-minded first so that you can objectively evaluate all the choices. So you look for the answers from the choices instead of like you make up your own answers. That's very important. So be open-minded, as especially important in the literature. So that's something we sort of like can now, like you have done other like all the practice, like the difference, you have seen all the other like different types of articles, like the right science, history, literature, and also you do a lot of questions as well. You probably can understand that like the very important mindset mentality of the SAT is like they want you to be very rigid in terms of you are very evidence-based, right? You are not like a super creative and very subjective. So you are objective. But in the meantime, they want you to be also flexible, adaptive. Your brain can, right, work very flexible and open-minded as well. So you need to find that balance. All right, you need to find that balance. So they want you to be able to follow like the science brain, like to do a lot of like the reasoning, right? That thought process, step by step. But in the meantime, they also want you to be open-minded, be empathetic, so you can consider the other perspective from others' angles. So that's all very important as well. So it's like a brain exercise. Okay. So that's a big summary of like review of like all this concept. But again, when it comes to application, right? Do you know how to apply this method by yourself now? And are you getting better and better? That's also very important. So for this article, right? Do you remember this article, like Mrs. Allen and Catherine? So that's also a very typical, like a movie-like article, right? Have a scene in a ballroom, right? And a lot of conversation, and also very importantly, this perspective change. So sometimes some part of the article is from the Catherine's perspective. Some parts of the article then switch to Mrs. Allen, and also sometimes the articles switch to the narrator's perspective as well. So narrator is also one of the character, very important character as well. Don't confuse the narrator with the author. All right, narrator is narrator, the author is the author. So the article will ask about the author's purpose, but they will also ask something like, what's the narrator's attitude towards something? Okay, so importantly, when you read the article, right, you need to be aware this hidden characters, like the narrator, and especially when in the sentence, when in the passage, they have that sentence tell you the narrator's feeling or attitude, right, to somebody, to other characters, or to something. They have that. Some articles have that comments, but some articles, for example, like this one, the narrator is more like just not that important. But if they have that important sentence from like comments from the narrator's perspective, pay attention to that. Definitely you will see a question. Like SAT will want to see if you can identify that as well. Okay. So shall we quickly just have a demonstration, like read through the article again, like see if that's how you read the article. Did you also pay attention to that kind of sentence that I highlight here? Right, so we practice that again. Now, more importantly, is the method. I want to see if you know how to process this kind of information. Are you getting your hands with this kind of method now? All right, so read that not much information here. James Austin, like we only like, yeah, of course. So we read the article. It says Allen was so long in jesting that they did not enter the ballroom till late. As for Mr. Allen, he rapidly directed the card room. So that's a lot of like just physical description, right? Like give you that very specific details about the event and the action. So that's less important, but you still need to try to use this information to visualize the environment. All right, the scene, create a scene. So rapidly directed the card room. So you have like the ballroom, right? And then like the card room. And then with more care for the safety of her new gown than for the comfort of her prosthetic. So here, prodigy, that's something you need to sort of like pay attention to, because that's talking about Mrs. Allen's sort of like the attitude, emotion, feeling as well. So identify that, like she cared about the safety of new dress. The gown made her way through the throng of men by the doors as swiftly as necessary caution will allow. All right. So can you understand that, right? Do you get a feeling, right? Can you visualize that, right? You dress up and then you're very careful about your dress, right? So you can sort of like make sense of that as well, right? And then Catherine, however, kept close to her side and linked her arms so firmly. Pay attention to this adjective and adverb. So that's the cue. With her friends, so we know their relationship now, they're friends, to be told as long as that's common, but any common efforts of struggling assemblies. Still, they move on. So I visualize that what they're doing here. They move on, something better was yet in view, and by continued exertion of strength and ingenuity, they found themselves at last in the passage behind the highest bench. Can you understand that? All right, can you understand that part? Right, can you visualize that? Right, so finally they move through the clouds, right, the assemblies, and then find themselves at the end of like in the ballroom. And then highest bench, it was splendid sight. So it was a splendid, and she began for the first time ever. She, who is she? Feel herself at a ball. She longed to dance, but she had not an acquaintance in the room. So another thing you need to pay attention to is the pronoun. So make sure you understand, identify, right? You follow the author by identifying the pronoun, what the pronoun refers to. So who is that she? Is Catherine or Mrs. Allen? Right? If you soon read the following, you will find out that, oh, it's talking about Catherine. So that tells you the feeling, right? She longed to dance, but she had not any acquaintance in the room. So these are the details that is more important you need to pay attention to, right? See that sentence here? First one is about Mrs. Allen's description about her, and then Catherine, right? And then like here, her attitude, telling you her attitude about the ball, and also like she wants to dance, but just like she has no acquaintance in the room. That's it. Don't make any other inference. Don't make any further inference. Or she feel happy, she feel unhappy, she feel embarrassed, right? We don't know yet. So don't make any assumption. So that's something I mentioned before, right? You feel the feeling, you identify the feeling, you feel for the characters, but not adding any extra information, personal judgment. Okay, that's very important. So that there's a fine line here. Why don't make any further inference here? Because you might make a mistake. Okay, so we just stay there and then hold on to the things. Again, hold on to the things that we can understand and we feel sure, and we just keep reading. So Catherine began to feel something of disappointment. Awesome, great. That's that's a clear cue about her feeling. She felt disappointment. She was tired of being continually pressed against by people. So that's the reason why she maybe a bit disappointment, right? Because of the dash. I would know that's this explanation. The generality of whose face possesses nothing 2 inches. So nothing like 2 inches, and with whom, all of whom she was so wholly unacquainted that she could not relieve the irksomeness of imprisonment by the exchange of syllables with any of her fellow captivist. So again, that's a whole sentence is talking about her internal thoughts and feeling, right? So that's very important, that sentence. So understand that sentence, make sense of that sentence, feel about the sentence, get the same similar feeling, like, right? Try to feel the same thing, and pay especially those key words. All right. And then we can keep going. Why that's important, right? Because not only it tell you straight away, like her feeling, disappointment, right? And irksomeness, but also about the reason, sort of like give you the reason why she feel that like disappointment, right? So that's very important. So it's like a sort of like a reasonings plus the feeling sentence. So not only we know she feels disappointed, but she also like somehow give us a why she feel that disappointment as well. So if it, and that's sort of like the question that usually, that's the sentence that asset would definitely ask a question as well, usually ask a question as well. So we hold on to that sentence. That's an important sentence. But again, don't over interpret. Get the idea, move on. They saw nothing of Mr. Allen, and after looking about them in vain for more eligible situation, were obliged to sit down at the end of the table, at which a large party were already placed without having anything to do there or anything to speak to except to each other. Okay, so again, similar to like we understand what's going on here. So Mrs. Allen congratulated herself. So see how we process the information paragraph by paragraph, right? So the second paragraph, definitely more important is that sentence. And then we move on to the next paragraph. Mrs. Allen congratulated herself as soon as they were seated on having preserved her gown more from injury. So see the perspective change now to Mrs. Allen. It would have been very shocking to have a tone, said she. Would not it? It's such a delicate Muslim. For my part, I have not seen anything I like so well in the whole room, I assure you. All right, so that is a comment come from Mrs. Allen. And that gives you that information about her. Not much, very specific, right? Defining sentence. So this kind of like wording, right? Disappointment, irksomeness, and right, she was tired of. This kind of sentence, we call them like the defining sentence. Or wording, sorry. Why? Because it tells you, right, exactly how that person feels. So that's good. We don't need to guess, assume, right? For this part, it is less defining, right? It's like, so we don't make too much assumption here, but we just know that like, yeah, that sort of like give us that kind of like right, a description about that, about her. She care about, but at least, right, we know that like she definitely care about her dress a lot. How and also she think highly about her dress. All right, that's it. So how uncomfortable it is. So we highlight that, like if they have a question later, we come back and process that information according to the question, and then we look at the choices one by one. So that's how you do that. Like how you deal with this less defining sentence. You don't make too much judgment or interpretation until you see the question. One of the question, right? Why I say that? Like, because later on when you see the question, they have that question. They have that question. I see how SAT will ask you regarding that part. The description of Mrs. Allen, right, in line 26 to 30, primarily served her. So that's a purpose question. You need to be open-minded. So look at the choices here. Right? How do you do this question? You don't make any personal judgment. You don't generate your own answer because you don't have any clear evidence. So you just look at the choices one by one. illustrate her unruffled personality. That's wrong, right? Probably we don't see any like that's her personality throughout the passage as well, right? She doesn't have that kind of like unruffled personality. Calm, right? Unruffled means calm, right? Not easy to get burdened, undisturbed personality. That's not right. Highlight her scrupulous, right? That's not right as well, like because again, we don't see that. Show her expensive taste. Probably not right. Again, you look at the details, but you also think about the overall, right? The overall personality of Mr. Allen. It's not about how her taste is very good or like not good. It's very expensive also. And establish a sense of vanity. Could that make sense? Out of these 4 choices, would that be the best answer? Right? Again, she congratulated like the injury and then like preserve her gown from injury, right? Shocking to have her tone. I've not seen anything well, I assure you. So vanity means what? You care about the material, right? So that could be correct. Again, out of these 4 choices, that's the best choice that we have. It is closest to the original meaning and it complies with the overall profile, right? Personality of that person as well. So that's how to do this kind of like SAT, like the literature question. And you will see that like I mentioned before, right? It is not mentioned. It's not directly mentioned in the article at all. So that's why I mentioned, like it is a bit, you will see more interpretation and assumption, like a bit further away. The answer will be a bit further away to the original question, to the original test. But again, it makes sense, especially compared with the other choices. Right. So for the literature, you need to sort of like use it, like you need to be more tolerant to the answers. So you sort of like SAT will break its own rule on the literature questions. So you should be more open-minded. So through the practice, you get used to that, right? You get better, more adaptive to this kind of like literature questions. So we keep reading. So that's a very good example to show you like to demonstrate like how you read a question. So you would not interfere, like would not be so you don't make too much interpretation until you see the question, right? How uncomfortable it is, whisper Catherine. So again, we know how her feeling not to have a single acquaintance here. So how's Mrs. Allen's attitude, right? And then let's have a look. So hold on. Yes, my dear, replies Mrs. Allen with perfect serenity. It is very uncomfortable indeed. Okay, so she says, what shall we do? The gentlemen and the ladies at the table look at if they wonder why we came here. We seem forcing ourselves into their party. Do you have the same experience before? Right? Try to visualize, again, feel about that. So do I, like that's very disagreeable. I wish we had a large acquaintance here. So that's, I follow through the conversation, know which sentence is from whom, right? So this one is from the Mrs. Allen. I wish we had any, it would be somebody to go to. Very true, my dear. If we knew anybody, we would join them directly. That was here last year. I wish they were here now. Had not, we better go away. As it is, here's no tea things for us, you see. No more there are indeed. How very provoking. But I think we had better sit still. So Mrs. Allen still think we should stay there. For one gets so tumbled in such a crowd, like how? It's my head. Again, how's my head, my dear? So she still care about her appearance. So that comply with like her sense of vanity, right? So that's how you, when you read the article, you feel about the characters, you get sort of like get an idea about who that character is. And when you choose the answer, you can refer, like you can think about that, link to that as well. My dear, somebody gave me a push. That hurts, I'm afraid. No, indeed, it looks very nice. But dear Mrs. Allen, are you sure there's nobody you know in all this multitude of people? I think you must know somebody. Again, Catherine. I don't appoint my word. I wish I did. I wish I had a lot. I couldn't hear with all my heart. And then I should get you a partner. I should be so glad to have you dance. That's sort of like strange, all of a sudden saying that, like, I wish I could get you a partner. I wish you could get you dance. Do you think that's sincere? There goes a strange looking woman. What an odd gown she has on, how old fashioned it is. Look at that back. Do you think it's sincere? Like she wants to find Catherine a partner for her to dance? That's a trap question, all right? That doesn't matter. Don't think about whether, oh, she is so strange, she's so insincere, hypocrite, like hypocrite. Don't think about that. Like whether she's sincere or not, doesn't matter. But she said that. We take it literally. Right? She said that like she wants to find her partner to dance. Again, because they have a question, right? Mrs. Allen's response in the right, mainly serves to look at the answers one by one. How strong they are in the midst of the ball. 53 to 55. Which sentence? Here, I wish I had an acquaintance here with all my heart, and then I should get you a partner. Highlight the attempt she expand her social circle. Nope. Emphasize the goal of finding Catherine a partner. Yes. They don't like, it doesn't mention about their inability to mingle with a new acquaintance. It's not like they are not able to do something. So again, right, you're finding the most direct answer out of the 4 choices. Same for this one as well. That's the most direct answer compared with the other choices. Does that make sense? So like take it literally. All right, take it literally. Unless you have more evidence to support the other interpretation here. After some time, they receive an offer, right? That's it. Well, why I mentioned that again? Because that sentence is only related to that sentence. There's no much explained before and after. All right, so with that sentence, that's the only interpretation. We don't have any evidence to show that like she is not sincere. All right. But for the Catherine, after some time, they received an offer of tea from one of their neighbors. It was thankfully accepted, and this introduced a light conversation with the gentleman who offered. That's like right, the actual actions. So that's important. Just visualize that. Just think, get the idea, and then like you can move on. Which was the only time the animals spoke to them during the event till they were discovered and joined by Mrs. Allen when the dance was over. So finally, Mr. Allen joined them. Well, said he directly, I hope you have had an agreeable ball. So it's taught to Catherine. Very agreeable indeed. Do you think she is sincere? Probably not, right? Because again, before, right, a lot of like internal thought description tells us that like she feels disappointed, right? She feels uncomfortable. Right? And here she said like she's very agreeable indeed, and also like really endeavoring to hide a gray yawn, right? That is the sign, right? I would tell you, will show that like, yeah, probably That's not true, right? Her attitude doesn't change here, probably, right? Again, because of that part. So read, like, they will ask a question, definitely. So this kind of like when you see this kind of like interesting reaction, like you say something, but you don't mean it, right? That's usually when they ask a question. I wish she had been able to dance. Again, say that again, right? So that's true. I wish we could have got a partner for her. And I've been saying how glad I should be if the were here, right? And the party, right? She might have danced with I'm so sorry. She has not had a partner. We shall do better anything, even on the consolation. Where's the consolation? That's it. Finish. All right. So that's the story. You don't have much information, but you don't need that much information. Everything that you need for the questions is in the article. So that's how we process the information. So now, like, you look at the questions, right? The main purpose of the first paragraph, still remember the first paragraph? Look at the choices one by one. The first one, distant relationship? Nope. It doesn't highlight that. It's not about Mr. and Ellen as well. So how claustrophobic? What does that mean, right? Wow, too crowded and make them, right? The ballroom is too small, too narrow, too closed. That's not right. Right, that answer, that part probably could be right. But this part, we don't see any clear clue describing that. Describe the main character's belated arrival at the ball. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's correct, right? Nothing wrong with that answer. They were late. And the main characters, and that's like the first paragraph. Now think about that, right? It is talking about describing their arrival. Induce the friendship. Nope. So again, you really need to understand the passage in order to get this question correct. But if you understand that, the choices here, right, you should be able to evaluate like they are, which one might be the best answer. The other answer. So at this stage, right, again, right now, like you understand the passage, but more things we need to practice more as well is your understanding of the choices. So you need to be more familiar with those wrong answer, right? What kind of answers SAT will generally create as the wrong answer? What kind of answer will be correct? Like you usually be correct, right? So remember, like we talk about did we talk about that, right? So imagine that like, we have 3 piles. So sometimes the answer will like one is it's like a rubbish bin. These kind of answers you just throw in directly. That's wrong. Definitely wrong. But sometimes we have, right, the perfect answer, the right answer. Correct, acceptable, right? Definitely correct. But a lot of times the answer might be just, the choices may be pending. But pending is still acceptable. All right. So a lot of time the answer will be, the correct answer will be here. The correct answer. So we need to be able to get used to that bottom line. So there's a bottom line here. So for example, think about how you sort out your things, your clothes, right? At like closet, right? What kind of clothes you just definitely chuck it in like to the bin or donate, right? Or like just throw them away. There's a hole, right, in those clothes, right? Definitely, right? So for that kind of like problem, you would just throw them into the bin without second thought. So that kind of details, right? That's wrong. Why? Because That's not true. Definitely not true. Or this kind of like, that's not true. That's not directly mentioned. Even I can sort of like infer, but that's not, I shouldn't infer here. That's not the focus. That's wrong. The detail is wrong. The whole thing's wrong. That's wrong. And the answer, right? Again, that's not the main purpose of the whole paragraph. Compared with the B and C answer, that's wrong. So that's how you evaluate the choices. Okay, you need to have a very clear picture about how to evaluate the choices, the standards. And then you practice that standard so you get better, you refine your standards, the standards. Okay, the narrator implies that Catherine, that's implied question, did not have an enjoyable time at the ball. Is that correct? Right? That's probably right. Yeah, that's what we have read like a lot of like times in the article. Check the other answers. So see that like, if you have that clear picture, right? That for this answer, like you probably just already put it in the right pile, right? Unless you see anything that worth your attention as well. Would rather not to have danced with anyone. No, that's not true. She said that like, she wanted to dance, long for a dance. Had a fine time at the ball in spite of herself. That's not right. Does not like keeping the company by Mrs. Allen. That's not true. It doesn't mention that. The article doesn't, right, talk about that. So which one? Phone 3A. So for this, a lot of questions, I would say that like try, when you do the questions, right, in order to save time, for some of the question, you need to quickly make a very quick judgment and then you move on. For what kind of question you can do that? When you feel confident. All right, don't second guess everything. Only second guess or like double check when you are not sure about something. So this question, you should definitely move on very quickly because it is very easy, straightforward. Okay. And the choices here, evidence, you should be able to identify that very easily as well, right? Remember which part of the article talk about that. What's the answer for this one? Question 3. Vincent, what's your answer?
I got C.
15 to 20, right? You feel disappointment, all these things. That's correct, right? Exactly what we talk about, what we have seen here. Correct, enjoyable time. And then question 4 here. That is a vocabulary question here. How to do this type of question? Firstly, right, go back to the article, find that word in the article. Where is it, right? Here. Does that make sense? Does ingenuity make sense in that context, like the ingenuity meaning, right? If you, ingenuity means what? Like original, right? Clever, inventive. So probably it doesn't make too much sense here if you just think about like the most common meaning. So what you can do, you can just simply cover that words and just plug in the word in the choices one by one and see which one make the most sense here in this context. So talk about what? It's describing how they move on, right? And by a continued exertion of strength and they found themselves at last in the passenger behind the highest bench. So out of these 4 choices, which one will probably fit in here? Evelyn, what's your answer for this one?
I chose B, but I'm not sure.
What's the meaning of B? Yeah.
It's like when you have the skills to like perform the thing.
Yeah, you can like especially when you're talking about the agility, right? Like you have the skill, like your hands, right? Very like you can do something, very delicate things. Then something like that. Dexterity. So here, in this context, they talk about the strength, and they're very flexible, so that like they can move along, right? Move through the people and go find their way. So that's correct. That's the right answer. The other one, not accurate here, not appropriate here. No, it's not a meaning in this context. And generative does have this meaning as well. So again, that's how we do this type of question. We sometimes, right, some of the questions, some of the vocabulary questions, this kind of like a vocabulary questions, the two types. One is just like the you're finding the meaning. You're finding the meaning of the words in the articles. And then like, so you're looking for the similar meaning. So it's like the meaning, if the words is actually make sense in the original, in the article, and then like, so you're just looking for, you're looking for the thesaurus. So like the similar meaning, have the same meaning. Synonyms, right? So you're looking for something like that's one type of like the articles or the questions. The other one is like testing the secondary meaning of the common words. So you have a common word, but the meaning is not like but in that context, in that article, like that word is used not in a very common way, not in a very familiar way. So it is actually the secondary meaning of that word. So what you should do, right? Don't get influenced by the original meaning of that wording. You should better just cover it up and then check what is the missing meaning and plug in all the choices and find the best answer. That might be easier for you to find the right answer. Okay. We talk about the question 5 and question 6, according to the passage, right? Uncomfortable, right? Again, talk about the uncomfortable because. So look at that question, right? So I mentioned that like it's definitely related to this part. So why this part is important? Because it's not just tell you she's uncomfortable, but it also tell you why. So it already tell you that internal motivation or internal thoughts, internal reasoning. It has a logic in that sentence, right? We need to identify that, and they will always ask questions. Is that because they're too now noisy or clouded? They do not know anyone at the ball. All right. Again, this is a very simple question. Very straightforward one. Choose that one, move on, save your time. Which statement best characterizes the relationship between Mrs. Allen and Catherine? The relationship question again. Go to the choices one by one and elimination. All right, so Vincent, what's your answer for this one? And can you tell me your thought process?
Yeah, so I chose B. Actually, I was choosing between A and B. Defers to have a conversation. Yeah, so I settled with B.
Is there anything like that make you feel a bit uncertain in the B answer?
Yeah, because amusement wasn't exhibited in the conversation at all.
So do you think that's the right answer?
So it should be A here.
So how about the A? Let's have a look. Irritated by Mrs. Allen.
Both
But-
of them are not.
Yeah, right. That's something we need to think about. Irritated. It doesn't mention that like she angry or something, right? Like demonstrate straight away to Mrs. Allen. But so that's something we talked about before, right? You need to feel for the character. That would be easier for you to choose this kind of answer. Even neither of these two was explicitly mentioned in the article. But which one is more likely to be Catherine's attitude to Mrs. Allen? And also the A answer, the whole meaning as well, right? She is irritated by Mrs. Allen, but defers to her in conversation. What does that mean?
She basically like settles for, because she no other choice, forced to refer. Yeah.
Defer, right? Like have you ever experienced that, right? You're irritated by someone, but still like you didn't express that openly, right? Clearly to that person. You just defer, but you still like defer to her. Maybe your parents, right? Like you're still, okay, fine, you're right. But right, internally, you're not very happy. So that's what that defer means. Defer to her in the conversation, right? And irritated. Yeah, I agree. Like but you need to think about that. Again, it's not amused. Which one would be better? So we're comparing. Remember that we are comparing the choices and we're choosing the best one. And also remember that like literature, they have more room for interpretation, right? So you're allowed to make interpretation in the literature. SAT makes interpretation in the literature as well. But amused by Mrs. Allen, but is frustrated by her lack of social connections. Probably the later part is fine, but the first part, what does amused mean? When you're amused by somebody, all right, find somebody funny. That's the meaning. Do you think Catherine finds Mrs. Allen funny? All right, that's not mentioned at all in the whole passage. So which one will be like, so, but irritated, right? Like that's sort of like annoyed or unhappy or upset, right? So that could be fine, a bit fed up by, right? That kind of feeling. The answer will be A. Because amused is wrong. So that's how you make that judgment. That's the reasoning process, rationale you should have. Why A is correct? Because A could be correct, but B is definitely wrong. I know A is a bit like not directly mentioned in the article, but that feeling, general feeling, yeah, I think that comply with the Catherine's right in the article. So that's how we read the literature. Think about that. You are not just based on the factual evidence in the article. Sometimes you need to have some interpretation, inference as well. So based on your general understanding of the character, personality, and feeling and attitude as well. So you sort of like step into the character's shoes and you can see things from her point of view and feel the same feeling of the characters and feel for her and choose the answer. That will be the better way, that easier way to choose the right answer. That will be more accurate as well. And it just makes sense. Do you think that makes sense? The A answer, yeah, like that makes sense. Another thing, but the harder thing may be the question 8 here, where to find the evidence. Let's look at the evidence. What's the evidence like the SAT gave you? So we can understand like how SAT generate the previous question and the previous answer. We can look at the choices one by one, see if you can find the best one here. So if you don't have you don't have a clear clue, right? So how to find the evidence to the previous question? Firstly, it should give you some information related to Catherine and Mrs. Allen. And also very importantly, you need to be able to find the specific linkage between the choices here and the choices to the previous answer. So it should talk about from Catherine's perspective. Does that make sense? So that's one thing you need to check. The choices here should come from the Catherine's perspective. So 31 to 34. How comfortable it is, right? Not to have a single yes, my dear, with perfect. Would that be correct? Probably not. It's not that very obvious. Evident, right? But 35 to 39. What shall we do? The gentlemen and the ladies at the table look as if they wonder why we came here. We seem forcing ourselves into the party. That's very disagreeable. I wish I had large acquaintance here. So saying that, like, say with perfect serenity, it is very uncomfortable indeed. What shall we do? The gentlemen and the ladies at this table look as if they will wonder why we were here. (40 to 43). That's probably wrong because that's more from Mrs. Allen's perspective, 50 to 52. But dear Mrs. Allen, are we not sure there's nobody there? There's nobody, you know, I think you must know somebody. For the answer here, the answer that I should give you is the B answer. Yeah, I mean, for this question, probably that's not very, I wouldn't worry too much about this question here because it is not that clear. But you can have a look at why the answer is B. It's just because why I'm saying it's unclear because it shows a conversation, right? But it's not very well demonstrated how she irritated. And so probably that's not that very evidence here in the conversation. So I wouldn't say that like that's the, so the answer for the question 7 is fine, but I wouldn't say the answers, the evidence just come from that sentence. It's more like an overall. All right, I think it's more like an overall. I don't think that's a very good question to put here. Okay, I don't, yeah, so don't worry too much about that question. I think that's it better like we don't focus too much on that. That will over, like, otherwise that might over influence you. Okay, don't worry about that. For the question 9 here, agreeable here means what? A. That's an easy one. So that's the first one, right? It's just like this meaning, same meaning. Just check the meaning. Agreeable here means enjoyable. And the question 10, the conversation between Mr. Allen and Catherine, right? Review that Catherine is what? Remember that sentence? We read that. Only being polite to Mr. Allen to conceal her real feelings. How about that? Very good answer. She's being polite. That could make sense. Again, right? So you feel for Catherine. So you step into her shoes and you feel like, yeah, that's probably she's doing what she's doing, right? The other one, incredible tired and therefore not paying attention. No, she still pay attention and not like tired. Extremely bored and does not care. That's not right. Offended by Mr. Allen's question and answer sarcastically. That's too much. So the answer is A is the best answer. So for the literature, right, they want you to be able to step into the office, like the character's shoes, and to feel, to do like this kind of like question, to be able to answer this kind of question. Because a lot of these questions is asking about those internal feeling, the internal thoughts of the character, rather than what does the character do, those factual things, right? So when you read the article, you need to focus more on those internal thoughts, that kind of information. Okay, does that make sense? Like, do you get an idea, right, how to do this question now? That's very important as well. Okay, so about again the method, right? About a method, like about the thought process, how to read, how to think, how to do the question, right? That's more important. Let's take a break. Well, let's take a break here. And so come back in 10 minutes and we do the next one. All right. Yeah, so come back at 11:10. See you later. It's the sentence that we can understand and we want to focus on, pay more attention to as well. Be careful of the green water tumbling between them. Okay, that's a very right. At least we see a sentence that strongly, clearly tell you his feeling. During the confusion, that for the moment, as the steamer settled to her, Rose looked down into the four faces upturned to her and seemed to read in them something that both pleased and pained her. Wow, that is a mixed feeling. So now the spotlight is on Rose. So see how that's the spotlight changed, the camera changed, right? So identify that, and that's a feeling she's feeling. It doesn't explain too much, but so get that feeling, and that's fine. It was only a glance, and her own eyes were full, but through the midst of happy tears, she received the impression that Ashif was about the same, that Mac had decidedly improved, and that something was amiss with Charlie. There was no time for observation, however, for in a moment the shore rush began, and before she could grasp her shoveling back, Jamie was named to her like a young bear. She was with difficulty released from his embrace to fall into regular, gentler ones to the elder cousin, who took advantage of the gentle excitement to welcome both blooming girls with affectionate impartiality. So again, right, can you visualize? So embrace one and then the others, but that's with affectionate impartiality. Get the idea? Keep going, right? Then the longer were born, the procession of Jamie dance jigs before they then even like came away. So Ashif remained to help his uncle get the luggage through and the others escorted to the home. No sooner were they like set up in the carriage. However, then a new and curious constraint seemed to fall upon the young people. Again, because they realized all at once that their former playmates were men and women now. Again, can you feel for them? All right, I'll get like the idea, get a gist, right? An idea here. Oh, right, finally, why they have this kind of like confusing feelings, right? Perplexed feelings, paradox feelings. Maybe something changed. When what is changed? Right, so that's something we can definitely get, right? Something's changed to them. They feel like former playmates were men and women now. But that's it. So we don't make too much interpretation here. We just do the question now. Just check the question. But you get that idea. You get the main point, right? Most of the points. Some part you're still not sure like what's that like trying to say, but you get, again, you process, you know which part, like all these parts, like the structure. You identify the structure of the article, right? You know where to find the information. So let's look at the question. Which choice best summarizes the passage? The passage provides an explanation of relationship within a family. Is that true, right? Just about the explanation? Right, that's something we're not sure about that idea. The passage presents a revelation about a children growing older. Could that be correct? Is there a revelation, right? And children growing older, they have children and they're growing older. That at least that's something to talk about, right? A main point that is covered in the article. The passage captures a conversation regarding reuniting cousin. They have a lot of conversation, but the conversation is not just about, the whole passage, right? It's not just about captures a conversation. All right, and it's not the conversation, it's not even happen. There's no conversation between the cousins, right? If you think about it, especially this part. So the C answer wrong. The passage describes an anecdote about shoveling. That's definitely wrong. So which one? A or B? What is the main idea, right? We're sort of like the talk about the main thing about the whole passage. Winston, which one would you choose?
I chose A.
Now have a look again. Would you still choose A? The whole passage provides an explanation of the relationship within a family.
But then B's option about like children growing older, there's no process there, right? Like, and the revelation, so-called revelation, can only be explained through like the last paragraph. So that probably isn't summaries isn't like
Yeah, something we need to think about, right? Even it is only mentioned in the last paragraph, but could that be like a part of the main idea of the passage?
yeah.
Right? It could still be the main idea of the passage. So it's like, could be like the whole thing at the beginning. It's just pave the way, right, for the final, like the last part, this how they finally reunited, and then like, right, they met the rival of the like the cousins, and then like they finally met each other again, and then like they have that revelation. That's the main idea. Again, the B answer, look at the B answer. Is that what this passage is about? The main idea, summarize the passage. What's the main, so that's basically what's the main idea of the passage? Is the passage just to provide an explanation of the relationships of within a family? Probably not correct, right? It gives you some idea about the relationship in the first part, but that's not like an explanation, right? And the later part, more important part of the article is more about, right, after so many years, when they met each other, the feeling that they feel about for each other. So is there have a revelation? Yes. Do you have like children growing older? Yes. So it presents a revelation about children growing older. Yeah, correct. So the main idea, again, another thing about the main idea question on the SAT, it might not be the most overarching answer. It's not a perfect answer. Does that make sense? It would be just the best answer out of the 4 choices. It's one of the main idea. All right, so you can, like, that is one of the main idea. Have a look. Evelyn, do you see why A is wrong now?
Yeah,
Why it is wrong?
it's like, it's really like the explanation, it's not like the relationship when they're like, but that's like,
The article doesn't really explain, right? Explain why they have this kind of like relationship. What's their relationship? Think about, right? If the article is really, the main idea of the article is about provides an explanation of the relationship within a family, they will spend more effort on analyzing the relationship between all these people, rather than just about how they are feeling towards each other when they finally, right, meet each other. On that, so it's more about the on that spot at that moment when they meet each other, all of a sudden, like that kind of feeling at that right one moment, right? That's what this passage is mainly about when it comes to the, right, especially about Rose and Phoebe. That's not a relationship, right? That's not like explain the relationship, right? So think about that, like how, especially also how Rose meet each other, like the please and paint her, happy tears. Like they just feel like, oh, right, she changed a lot, right? The boys feel the girls change a lot. That's not like explanation of the relationship. So think about that. That's something when you read the choices, you need to have a clear thought about what does that choices is talking about and whether that's what this passage is talking about. So A answer is not the focus of this whole article. And the B answer, yeah, that is the focus of this article. Does that make sense? So it doesn't matter whether it is only this part or it only is this part or it's not like related, because the whole thing, all right, it's not related to the quantity. It's related to The story-wise, right? The story-wise, what is the focus of this article? It is the revelation about the children growing older. Even it's just the last part, it's still, that's the focus of this article. So you need to think about the article from a very like a holistic view, and then like which is the author's main focus of this article, right? The passage, and out of these 4 choices, which one is the right answer? One of the, you can think about, even think about as the one of the main focus. Maybe the best answer could be like, oh, describing a rival of like a distance, relatives like who haven't met each other a long time or something. Yeah, that could be a better answer, but right, but we don't have the answer here. So you need to be able to choose, still be able to choose the best one out of these 4. Does that make sense? Yeah. So don't expect you will see the, so that's also the reason why I mentioned that, like, don't generate your own answer, right? But you just like evaluate the choices one by one, and then like be able to cross out the wrong answer. And when you have 2 choices left, right? So they are both independent, right, piles, but which one is a better answer? So be able to identify that out, check that one, find that like the better answer here. So when you're comparing, right, you will see that like A, yeah, that's not good. So I would choose the B. B, it will be a safe answer. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's just safe. So if we just, yeah, if we just think about that, like, so the pending will be, right, we put something in the pending, right? And then we have like a bottom line here, right? Half of them will be wrong, right? Not acceptable, and half of them are acceptable. It was safe. Still better, right? Still like the other one is like wrong. It's still wrong. So that middle part, that middle line is the bottom line. Think about that. Think about that. So I jot that like diagram. So help you to get the idea, how to evaluate the choices. The B answer, over the course of the passage, the attitude of the cousins shifts from, so our attitude question. Again, elimination, all right, elimination. Which one would be wrong? Cross out some answers first. Diffidence, that's wrong. Diffidence is the like the opposite of like confidence, right? Right, defiance, right? And embarrassment, do we have that? Apprehension, anticipation, is that correct? Reticence means silence. So constraint probably could be right as well. But how about the first one? Right? Which one would be the better wording? Anticipation, what do you think? Right? They expect. They're looking forward to seeing their cousins. So that's how you choose the right answer. You compare them one by one. You compare that one by one. And the second part could be both correct situation, like you try the first one. And the first one, which one is the better answer? And then you choose the best answer. Okay. Question 3. Which statement best characterizes the relationship? Again, right? See, attitude, relationship. Among the reunited cousins, be open-minded. Let's look at the choices one by one. They are excited to get back to their ordinary lives and friendships. Is that correct? Nope, it doesn't mention about their ordinary lives. They have changed so dramatically to find anything in common. Is that correct? Isn't that type too extreme? All right, does that mention that like there's nothing in common? Doesn't emphasize. They talk about the change, but that is too extreme. The younger cousin helped put the older cousins at ease. Does that make sense? What does that mean? The younger cousins help the older cousins feel better, feel all right, more relaxed. It doesn't mention that. Their growing up has put limitation on their relationships. Could that make sense? How do you interpret this sentence, this statement here in the choices? Winston, what do you think?
Well, yeah, like the kind of that's when, like, you know, when they say the affectionate impartiality. So that's when that kind of feeling comes in. So limitations, as in restraints, as in they have to feel more restrained around each other. Not necessarily like they can't speak. So.
Yeah, correct, right? So that comply with the description in this part, right? And then like that growing up as well, right? That's the main thing of the article as well. Like so again, right? It would not use the exact same wording in the article. They would definitely paraphrase, but the paraphrasing is acceptable and the overall idea is correct as well. Makes sense. So it is sort of like a interpretation. Does that make sense? So the question is asking about an interpretation. So how do we interpret the relationship among the cousins? But instead of like you write down your own interpretation, you just need to listen to 4 students' answer and choose the best one. Right? And which one will be the best one? The best one will have more evidence from the answer questions, from the passage, right? And more directly supported by the passage. In other words, it comply with the passage. It comply with the overall, like the general idea of the passage. And that's the answer. So the answer is correct. And it's good that like you find out like specific wordings that can directly support the answer. So you find that once you find that specific evidence, you definitely will feel very confident, right? Because you find that linkage. So the right answer will always be able to find the linkage to the specific, the test, right? From like the evidence from test. But sometimes even you can't find out, you should still be able to choose the best answer out of the 4 choices. That's also very important. Because sometimes you won't have the time to do that all the time. All right. But if you remember that, right, that's easier. So Vincent remembered that, like, so, oh, okay, I remember it mentioned about that affectionate impartiality, right? And also the whole reaction data, like they just silent, right? That when they see in the carriage, the cabbage, right? They feel like the carriage, right? They feel like right? They realize all at once, men and women now, right? They change. Okay, good. Question 4 here. Evelyn, what's your answer for question 4?
I try C, but I don't. It's like.
Have a look at that again.
I don't think it's yeah.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah. Is it like an opening ish?
Well, probably not would be the opening because that's too literal, right? Okay. So we put that words one by one, plug in them like the young men stood together, right? waiting for with an impatient, was found something in lively skirmished with a small lad who provided premise like the right for amusement to the artist group there. So they found that impatient found something, right, in a lively skirmish. So the impatient found a vent. Vent means what, right? Vent literally means like the opening of something, right? Like, and then like you can, the air can get out and in, right? That's a vent. What the impatience? Would that be the outlet? So you have like an outlet for the impatience. So that's the vent here. You can find a way out. Basically, that's what that means. Right? The impatience find a way out. And then like, so here, all these wordings, outlet is probably the closest one to that meaning in this context. Right? It's not a crack. It's not something is broken. Right? It's not a passage. Right? It's not like a channel or something. It's just, it's not an opening. It's not something closed before and now it's like open or something. It's just an outlet. It's a way out. So that's like the literal meaning here. Yeah. And question 5, the conversation between the lady and the stranger served primarily to. Right? So they have that question. So which one will be the right answer? Vincent, what do you think?
I chose C.
Family who are waiting. Why? Let's have a look at the other like answers. Can you tell me why the other answers are wrong? For example, the A answer.
Yeah, so show how the town locals tend to gossip about the family. Yeah,
that's too much inference.
You have a stranger as well, so I'm assuming they're not like, so which is that us, the stranger? I'm assuming that the people who are.
Yeah, but do you see that like that's an inference, right? That's a deduction, but like that is too much. And that's not the focus here.
Yeah.
So it is possible, it is likely that like these people, right? They probably know a lot about this family and they tend to gossip about the family, but that's not a focus here. And that's too much inference based on the conversation. So that's a very common error answer. Okay. When you have a very elusively wrong, like a likely answer, that usually is wrong. Like you know that is inferring too much, and that's not the focus here. Okay.
So question B, it's among the reuniting family. You don't really see the other half of the family, like they don't talk about the cousins on the boat. So I'm assuming that's. So you don't have like the other side, and D is irrelevant. So
introducing the traits of the family member who are waiting. Demonstrate the lady's lack of knowledge about the family. That's wrong, right? The answer is wrong. So again, B and C, B or C. Establish the relationships among the reunited families. Does it talk about what they are, who they are waiting? Reunited, the relationship among the reunited family, the trace, or let's have a look. They are and was waiting for their cousin who has been. How about that? Who has been aboard several years with her uncle, the daughter. So is C wrong? I mean, so is B wrong? B now is not wrong. Right?
Yeah, but you know where it says like the other, the eyeglasses and no gloves is Mac, the odd one just out of college. Like that's traits about Mac, right? It doesn't really talk about his relationship with like.
Yeah, something we can, so that's something we need to think about. The conversation here serve primarily to do what? So we are looking for what's the purpose of this conversation? So it's just about a trace, or it's more about a relationship between the young among the families. The whole conversation, right? It's just to tell you who they are, or it's just tell you that like their relationship about here, what's going on, what are they doing here, who are they, and what they are, right? But who are they here is more about their, right? So that's something you need to think about. This one, right? It has some like it talk about the trace, but is it really just about the trace, or it's more about the relationship? The conversation here, you look at the answers, like now you need to know, but right, if in the passage it doesn't talk about the cousins, like the girls, it only talk about the boys, then we will see that like the B answer is wrong. But if you think about now, like if you read it again, it does talk about what they're waiting for, like they're waiting for their cousins. Well, which is that, like, so that's the person. The traits, is that really mainly just about they're talking about, tell you that they're person, like the traits of the people, of this, like this boys? Is that what this conversation is more about through the whole passage? 7 to 26. Here. Here. With glasses and no gloves. The odd one, just out of college. He's Jamie, the younger brother. What do you think? Right, that's something you think about, right? Like that's how the conversation goes on here. I'll read it again. Who they are right, and they are waiting for their cousin who has been abroad. And then what is that? Oh, that's the Charlie, right? That's the most like, but that's he's the and the others are the brothers. Oh no, cousin. And then like the elder is Archie, the young man, and then like that is Mac, the odd one, and then like the boy, that's a Jamie. And that is the youngest brother of these four. And they're waiting for their cousin. So that's how the conversation goes on. Before sudden end, right? Had been finished, I'm like, so through this conversation, right? The purpose here is just to more about establish the relationship among the reunited family, or introduce the traits of the family members who are waiting. So you need to think about, according to the, like for the author, what is more important here, right? Out of these two choices. I don't see there is very, right? Another thing you can think about the traits. What is the traits? It's more like personality, or it's just more like how people describe another person, how other people see you, or it's more like your personality, what time you feel, what kind of person you are. So that's another thing, like you are from college, right? Just graduated from college, and you are the youngest brother, and the most promising of the seven. Are these traits? Personal traits? Yeah, probably not as well, right? Like so that's something you can think about, right? Usually when you Yeah, they have this confusing wording. All right, they will have this confusing wording, but in order to get to the right answer, the easiest way is, again, like think about the overall article, passage article, and also like the traits of the family member. What would that, if that were the answer, right? What the article should talk about what? So talk about more something more like a quality, internal, like personal quality. So the answer here is actually B, but again, that's a purpose question. So you probably see that now, right? That inference, right? That more interpretation here. And you have to choose the answer based on the choices that you have and be able to tell which one will be a better answer. It's easier to make mistake in the literature. So even sometimes you think you understand the passage, but still when it comes to a question, you might make mistakes based on your interpretation, based on your analysis of the choices, you might still be able to make a mistake. Right, so that's the hard thing for the literature. But now, like, think about that again, right? So that's why we practice. Through the practice, you train your eyes and your brains to be more critical. Right. So you identify the standard here, the aesthetic standard, the aesthetic weight of word, like the wordings here as well. And you just become more critical to with the standards, aesthetic standards, to evaluate the choices. Again, even we look at the details, right? But now you just take a step back and look at the choices again, right? Just from a more general perspective. What is the conversation here to the whole passage? What is more important to the author? Right? What's the author's purpose here to provide this conversation here for the audience, for the reader? Is to give you the traits of the family members. Do you really identify this traits, the personal perspective, like the personal characters of the members, or it's just give you some idea, right? The context of the family's member here. Right, through the conversation, those outsiders conversation, strangers conversation, right? Yeah, probably I just give you the established relationship among the reunited family. Does that make sense? So you need to be able to take a step back and really evaluate the choices from a more general perspective rather than just checking at the details. So that's a very important skills as well. Like you need to be able to switch the perspective, right? You focus on the details, but also you zoom in and zoom out, right? So you look at the details, but you also look at the overall whole passage. For the literature, the good thing is the literature, the answers here, right? It was still, when you take a step back and zoom out, the wrong answer would not comply with the whole passage. So even you find a specific wording that might support the answer, but overall, it doesn't make much sense. It's not the best answer. And for the question 6 here, the answer is A. They are waiting for their cousins. Right. So that gives you the idea about the relationship here. So we see that, like, so that can directly support the B answer in the questions. All right, think about these two questions. All right, question 7, commons. Primal indicate he what? By Phoebe to be beautiful. All right, that's more straightforward. And question 8, the description that follows Max commons the reviews that Mac is what? All right, so that is Max common. All right, it's not just that sentence, right? Remember that, right? Remember that part we talk about is remember like, but he was not looking at, right? So when you say that, like definitely they will ask a question. Here we go, they ask a question. Not actually pay attention to his uncle. Yeah, correct. But that's more straightforward. See, like not all the questions are like that. Right, that's a hard question. It's two, question 5 and question 6. But most of the question in the literature is quite literal. All right, so you don't need to think too much. You just find the most literal meaning, and that's correct. Right, the other one, where the possibility of falling into the ocean, that's wrong. Right, more excited to see his aunt, that's wrong. By all the examined, that's wrong. Right, all the other answers are very obviously wrong. Okay. Question 9, it can be inferred that Rose is both pleased and pained when she revealed her cousin from the ship because what? Inference question, be careful. Not like this one. Right? This one is explicitly explained why he paid more attention. Right? He's not looking at the uncle. But this one, it doesn't really explain in that part. Right? He just say that like Rose looked down, right, in the 4 faces upturned to her and seemed to read in them something that both pleased and painted her. It was only a glance and her own eyes were full, but through a mist of happy tears, received an impression that the day was about the same, right? So it just further elaborate on describe her feeling, but it doesn't tell you that why she feel in that way in that part. Right, in that part. But later on, they talk about that as well. So now how do you answer this kind of question, right? You just check the answers one by one and step in Rose's shoes. So that's what you need to do. You need to be able to think like Rose and choose the best answer based on the information that provided in the passage. Okay. I feel exhausted and confused after a long journey by sea. Is that correct? That's not mentioned, right? That's not mentioned in the article. I don't have that cue, like she was tired because of the long journey. Believe her cousin don't recognize her anymore. I don't think that's also that's the reason in the article that's mentioned. Really. And that's not true as well. Sense that her relationship with her cousin has changed. Could that be correct? Yeah, that's mentioned in the article, right? Talk about that, like later on, talk about something like that whole thing, right? They all realize that something's changed. Concluded that her cousin's life has gotten that's wrong. So when you step in the character shoes, all these choices, like, right, you just think which one makes sense to you, to the character, according to the passage, right? Because why you can do this way, like why you can do so, rather than just based on that very specific like reference, because you understand the article now. You understand these details, right? Like you understand the passage, so you can feel safe to do so. But if you don't understand the passage, I wouldn't encourage you to do so because you might tend to think too much. You don't have a reasonable base. You don't have a solid base to just choose the answer. But for this one, right, we understand that, we read that part, we identify there is something talk about that. So yeah, correct. C answer. That's definitely correct. I can find the evidence. And which part is the evidence? Which part talk about that, like they find, should notice something's changed? It's actually the answer. For they realized all at once that their former playmates were men and women now. Does that make sense? But think about that. Think about that. Why the evidence is here, right? But that sentence is here. Right? How can we use that as the evidence to support the answer in this question? What do you think? Why? Because they are in the same scope. Does that make sense? So they're still talking about the same reaction and feeling here. Right. So when they talk about that, like, so it's together. That kind of feeling is together. So she, right, feel that like pleased and painted her at was a glance and her own food, but like the right, she impression that Asha was about the same. Right. Mac has improved, and then something on Miss of Charlie. Right. And then I also talk about like how, and then I talk about all this kind of like the interaction between this, all right, amount of characters, and also like release from her embrace, and then like that, right? Then the affectionate, right, who took advantage of the gentle excitement to welcome both girls and the boys, right, with affectionate impartiality, right? And then it talk about impartiality, right? And then talk about the last part as well, right? So they're all together, right? That feeling just consistent, like continue to the end. And also very importantly, that part, right, is related to the C answer. That's the part when it like really talk about the sense that her relationship with the cousin has changed. So see how that inference question is designed here. In the article, it doesn't explicitly explain, right, that's the reason why she feel that happy and pain, have that perplexed feeling. But according to what is described, like this information in the passage, we can make that reasonable inference that that's the reason. Right, and that makes sense. Again, think about if you were the character, you can feel the same way. And also definitely not the other answer. That other answer just not right at all, like baseless at all. Right, and then like the answer, that's the best evidence because that directly linked to the C answer. And that means what? Not aloof, not the C or D, restraint. So feel for the characters, right? Now I understand what I said before, right? Don't just stay as the literal meaning, right? Put yourself in their shoes and really like feel in the same way as them, but without making any, right, inserting personal judgment or any, don't interpret too much, but don't feel too much, right? So just feel like, sort of like, I said that it's like, be empathetic. That's very important as well. So literature teach you how to be more empathetic, but like the science article teach you how to be more objective. So you need to occupy both, right, brain, the right brain and the left brain. So science literature definitely require more right brain for that emotion, right? Right brain control that emotion. So I want you to feel the emotion. So that like it can be easier to find the right answer. Otherwise, you would just like, if you're too rational here, like, well, how could that be the reason, right? You start arguing with yourself, that's not helping you, right? You start arguing with the SAT, that would not help you, all right? So you need to be rationally emotional when you do the literature article. All right, okay, so think about that. Again, how do you get all of this question correct? So you might like, firstly, like how do you understand the passage, or also how do you get all this question correct as well? That's also hard, right? It's not easy, but that's doable. Again, when you look at the process here, that's some of the questions are trickier, right? For the B answer for 5 and 6, but now you can see that like still, right? I should be able to get the question 5 correct as well. And once I get the first question 5 correct, I should be able to get a question 6 correct as well, because that's the sentence that explicitly tell me, right, the relationship. So that's the best evidence for the previous answer. So do you see how to find the best answer for the previous question? How to do this type of question now, right? Basically, you get the question 5 correct first, and then like you find the evidence that directly support the answers in the previous question. But you need to get that questions correct first. So sometimes when you have no idea where to find the evidence, like which answer is correct for this question 5, you can look at the choices in the question 6. But then you probably need to, the first step you need to know is to find which part of here can answer this question. So you need to find the matching answer to the question first. But unfortunately here it's hard, it's impossible, because all these right choices is related to the conversation. So you can't use that method. Then you have to get the question 5 correct first, and then like you choose the answer for the question 6 in the question 6. Do you know what I'm talking about? Does that make sense? Well, let me have I'll check the other one. All right, for example, like this one. So question 9 here. That's the one you can use the evidence to help you to find the answer in the question 9. Why? Because the question, it can reasonably infer that the risk consider Adam to be worth playing for, because that is a detailed question. Right? It's asking a very specific literal meaning of a particular line. So when you look at the choices here, right, you just look at one by one, which part give you the reason why he think to be worth playing. And then once you find that line, so it's sort of like help you to locate the spot, the scope of that question. You can use the choices to help you to locate the question. So that's the one you can work reversely. All right, so if you can't find the evidence, if you have no clue at all, take advantage of the question 10 here, the evidence question here. So when the question is a very detailed question, so you can easily locate, right? You sort of like, without this question, you still need to find the specific lines for that question 9 anyway. But now it's just easier. They already give you 4 locations. You just need to choose one of them. Okay. Do you think you're getting better now, right, with this, right? Get an idea, like, but again, right, like, it's not enough we just listen and then I'll just talk and then I understand. You have to go back and rethink and rework the process by yourself, especially rethink the questions here, all these questions here. By going through the process again and again, you are training your brain how to think. Does that make sense? Right. So knowing is one thing, but doing it is another thing. So a lot of times you watch people play, right? And know, oh, I know how to play now, but can you do it yourself? That's another thing. You need practice. So how to practice that? Use your brain more to go through that process again and again. So you go through the right process a lot, and then like your brain like just know how to think, and then like you can practice that in the new questions. Okay, and see how it turned out. And then like identify new problem, right? And refine that. And then you think like, and so correct that. And you rethink again, right? You practice that again, and then you do the new practice. So that's a process how you get improvement step by step. And finally, right, improve a step by step and get like better and better. And get to like that top range or like the final stage, the final level. So it's sort of like step by step, playing a game. So definitely practice at home as well. Very, very important. So that's after class practice is more important than just in class. So in class, I just teach you how to think, like the focus will explain to you, clarify that, but you need to practice that like, so you can stay, that mind, your mind can stay there, rewind your brain by yourself. So we do it together, rewind your brain together. Okay. So let's have a look at the, let me look at the next one. All right. So we still have some time here. So shall we read the article again? So practice that method again. Like, so we read a passage together now. See if you can get a better idea this time. 5 minutes. All right. So it's now like 12:15. We start now. All right. Have you finished? Have you finished? So this article, right? You need to be careful about like the perspective. You need to be able to identify, right? The part of the article is talking about from whose perspective is describing who. So that's an important thing about the article. For example, the she here. Not this one. She turned and hurried away to where there was when she was dragging a chair in and out of her room, right? Which and she was disagreeable, no longer young, who had quarreled with almost everyone, owing to temper, which was self-assertive, without any true. What's that she here? Who is she? Dana or what? What is this? So you read that, right? Like she, and then like, so saying that who that's part is talking about what she fear, right? That's Edna, right? She's saying that she fear that it would useless to entreat her. And then like it's saying that like, I will ask her here definitely talking about the races, right? And then like, I would tell her that you want to hear her, she likes you, she will come. Then he turned and hurried away to one of the far cottage. So the camera, right, to visualize that, and then like where the race was traveling away, and she was dragging a chair in and out of her room, right? And she was that disagreeable little woman who no longer young, describing that she, and then like Robert prevailed upon her without any too great difficulty. And then like she entered, so that she is the same person, right? Entered the hall with him during a lot of like dance. She made an awkward in blah, 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 blah. She was a homie, right? So that's talking about who? Winston, what do you think? Describing.
Like she entered the hall.
She's who?
She is Madame Rates.
Yeah, correct. Right. So that's something you need to when you read that, like, you need to think about that, and then like, right, understand that part. And then saying that, oh, ask Mrs. Right, what she would like to hear me. She cries like, that's probably Adela, right? And she said perfectly to the right, while Robert cried her message to Adela, right? So that's another thing about the literature, the pronoun and the persons, right? You need to be able to identify that while reading, and then you get an idea about what is going on here. That's important. All right, that's important. To the window, a general air of right, and surprise and genuine satisfaction fell upon everyone as stood at the pianist enter, and there was a settle down. So it's talking about the pianist, like the everyone's feeling as well. Settle down and prevailing air of despondency everywhere. Was a trifle embarrassed at the beginning, thus sign out the little woman's favor. She would not dare to choose, and back that would place her in her selection. All right, so then I didn't choose, like doesn't choose the music, and then I asked the to choose. So this now the spotlight. She was what herself called very fond of music. Now the spotlight is on Edna, right? Very render or very teacher in mind. She sometimes like to sit in the room of the morning when they play and practiced. One piece which the lady played that was Enter Solitude. It was a short and then like, so that's now like spotlights on Edna, right? Call her mind. So talking about the pieces that she, do you see how the stories develop? right? So from this part now is about the internal thought, right? In sort of like internal thought of Adna, right? And her, in sort of like her retrospective, right? Her thinking about like her past experience. She was not what herself called for. So that's normal. Again, right? The story of like this kind of literature, like the only logic of the story development is the character's thought and emotion. So you cannot predict, right? Oh, is that like now it's talking about something in the past or something? Yeah, it is talking about something in the past, but it's sort of like in her mind, right? It's talking about in her mind. So she was watching herself, and then like she sometimes liked to sit in the room when she played. Another piece called her mind, right? And then like then a young woman called in the right, taking matching step, like right. So that's also all the songs that I've not listened to before previously, right? Piano, Sandal King, down to the Sparrow, right? And then it was not the first time she had heard an artist at the piano. Perhaps it was the first time she was ready. Perhaps the first time she being to take an impress of like the truth. She waited for the material pictures which she thought would gather and blaze before her imagination. She waited in vain. She saw no picture of solitude, or hope, or longing of the despair. Despair about like there was very passion that like So that's again, right? Her thoughts, a lot of her thoughts here talk about that. And then she finished. So see that like she played a song, and then like she her also have a lot of thoughts in her mind as well. Now go back to the reality, sort of like right. So it says that's the description again, right, of the setting again, the physical world. And then like that's the last comment that they taught to each other, right? How did you like the music? She asked. She here refers to, right? But then the young woman was unable to answer. Edna was unable to answer. She pressed the hand of the right panels, like perceive her agitation and even her tears. She patted her against upon the shoulder as she said, "You are the only one worth playing for. Those others." But she went shuffling the right towards her room. That's the end of the story. All right, I read it very roughly, but you need to go through that details if you want to. But again, that's what you need to think about when you read the article. You need to be able to identify the perspective change and be able to identify that so that you have a clear picture of what's going on. Okay. But let's go to the choices. Over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from the description of one woman to the detailed characterization of the group of people. That's wrong. A depiction of a place to a statement of the one character's opinion about a place. It's not about place. Opinions shared by many lay people to opinions held by a great artist. There's no, she's not like that's not how to define her, right? It's not a great artist or like opinions. So that's wrong. The setup of a situation to one character's reaction to that situation. What do you think? Would that be correct? That's probably the only answer, the best answer that we can choose from this concept, like from these choices, right? Situation here refers to what? Can you think about like Winston? What do you think? What's the situation? What's the sorry, Evelyn, your turn. What's the situation here?
Like playing the piano.
Yeah, exactly. Right, playing the piano. That's it. So don't get used to this kind of like how they paraphrase that kind of like use a very general wording to talk about the to summarize something. All right. Yeah, it's fine. You can use the situation to say that. B answer. Self-mailing to, right? The answer here would be the A. So those in attendance have fixed ideas about performance. That's best answer. Because, so firstly, you can think about that, right? First thing, go to the 32 and 22 and 28. That's another thing you can check. When you look at the 22, hear me play. She said, right? It's not 22, sorry. A general air of surprise and genuine satisfaction, right? And then like there was a settling down and the prevailing air of expectancy everywhere. So firstly, when you look at that part, it's from whose perspective? Right? It's about the audience. It's from the audience perspective. The B answer is definitely wrong. It's not describing her feeling. Right? It's not about Adana's feeling. Listener, anticipate that the will not be able to, that's wrong. So the answer must be A. Right? Even you are not, you can't interpret A immediately, right? You wouldn't like, oh, this idea, is that correct? Or can I say that? But if you look at the other choices, they're all wrong. And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. You can interpret in that way. Does that make sense? So that's how you choose the answer for the literature. That's the process. Elimination, right? Be open-minded and be able to justify the right answer. Even I didn't get that myself at first place, but now I look at that. Yeah, that makes sense. That interpretation makes sense. I comply with the overall logic of the offer as well. Right? So perspective. Point of view, that's very important. That's a very important thing you need to pay attention to when you do the right. You need to, in the choices, they will have like, they will contain a point of view as well. Right. So that's the easiest way to cross out the B and C. Does that make sense? So that sentence is describing, it's sort of like describing a feeling, but who's feeling? All right. So that's when you read that, you need to identify that as well. It's from everyone. All right. So that's something we, so definitely not B or C. Remember, that's a very important technique. The point of view is a technique that you should use. And question 3 here, right? The main purpose of the passage 2 and paragraph 2 and 3. Unpleasant attitude, which contrasts with the beautiful musician. Even I'm not sure about that part, but that's the best answer out of these 4 answers again. Right? That doesn't mention. Change a lot. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't mention. Describe like interaction with Robert, which reflect her general interest in social. That's wrong. That's not mentioned either. Right, again, right, the correct answer may contain something that is not explicitly mentioned in the article, but it makes sense. It could be correct, and or more importantly, other answers just not wrong, but not right at all. Right, doesn't mean that doesn't. So the correct answer will contain interpretation. Will contain certain inference. So I mentioned before, the correct answer will be a bit have more. You need to make sure that you have more interpretation and inference than probably the other question that we saw before in the other articles. So relatively, still again, relatively, that's the best answer. So get used to that and you will just easily make you feel like more comfortable with the answer. Does that make sense? I don't want you to doubt yourself, like unnecessarily doubt yourself every time, right? So for example, like this one day, yeah, fine. Which kind of like, yeah, fine. I guess you can say so because it does mention about her music is very beautiful. So that's all like a contrast. Even you didn't get that like at the first place, but now you look at, yeah, I think that makes sense. You could say that's the purpose. Purpose. Again, purpose. All right, more interpretation as well. Think about that, right? Interpret like purpose question. Be careful about the purpose question in the literature. Question 4, right? It can infer, inference. The music like that will play because refuse to choose. Why should refuse to choose? Feel that her music education is insufficient. It's talking about the education. Uncomfortable with being treated differently than other guests. Does not know the music have a lot of preferred. That's not right. It doesn't. She doesn't talk about she care about the others' music. Want to hear the. That's not true. B. And find the evidence to support that. So see that how we use the elimination, right? So on the literature, process of elimination, very important. All right, very important. You need to definitely very good at that. But confidently rule out the wrong answer. Because it's hard to predict the right answer. Okay. So find the evidence. Now it's easier because you can just directly go to the choices and find the sentence that stated that idea. 28 to 30. Let's have a look. 28 to 30, sorry, here. So was therefore embarrassed at being the signal out, right? Yeah, all right. I guess you can say so. She is a like right signal out. So probably, right, we can infer in that way, right? She's uncomfortable with being treated differently than the other guests. Do you see that? All right, do you see how to do these kind of questions? Right, and then do you see how SAT made that interpretation and inference? That's the range. So you can see that like for the literature, right? The range is a bit farther away, or it's a bit wider than the other articles, I would say. So you need to be aware of that and really get familiar with that as well. Okay. And the other questions, right? The for question 6, the answer will be D, perform. That's how you render the music, perform the music. And question 7, the answer is C, characterize the vivid scene music bring to this mind. And the question 8, the answer will be D as well. Right, that understood to be an imaginary woman. Yeah, that's right. Right, that's not D. That's not B. That's not B. And here, right, now we look at that one. The consider, I don't know, to be worth playing for because what? Only receive enough training. That's not about the training. Remember that part, right? It's talking about the last part of the article. Feel passionate and deeply about the music. That's correct. Right, that's accurate in the article. Never had an opportunity, that's wrong. Only understood what feel like to be a musician, that's wrong. So again, like you see that how the other answers are so wrong, that like the correct answer, yeah, it must be correct. Like that's the only answer that you can choose. And but this one is easy because that's very explicitly mentioned in the article. So the question 10 is easy as well. The answer will be D. Right. And then like the last one is someone who is intimidating but profound. How, again, is how Adana view her. So it's from her perspective. It's not what she really is, but what Adana feel about her attitude, right? That's about the attitude. So Adana's attitude towards Mrs. Race, and then like that's correct. The other answers wrong. Model, right? That's wrong. So yeah, and definitely we see that like she's a big fear to choose, right? Something like that. That could be right. But now, like, do you think you get a better idea about how to do the literature article, right? Do you see the special feature of the literature? So it's a bit special than the other articles, the passage and the question as well. But the general process is still the same. Our general method is still the same, but it just requires you have more emotion, all right, and be more tolerant, be more open-minded when it comes to interpretation and answering the questions. So definitely, right, practice that more. The practice like how to analyze the questions, how to analyze the choices, the method, right here we talk about, and how to be more open-minded, and also like how the correct answer could be correct, right? Just makes sense, and how the other answer is just wrong. So you need to get used to that as well, right? To what extent you can make that interpretation and still be correct. So get that feeling. Yeah, and then like the good thing about the literature is like the other, once you get the idea, right, you can understand the important part in the passage, you should be able to get most of the questions correct, right? There are a lot of things about details about, like, for example, here, right, the music, right? That's not mentioned, that's not asked at all. So that's very hard to understand things. It's actually not less important. Sometimes the very descriptive details is less important. So you need to just hold on to the emotion, the feeling, that kind of sentence. You identify that sentence is important, and then try to understand that. Like that's what you need to do. Right. So be able to identify those sentences as the first step to differentiate which sentence is more important in the literature. So go through the process. You can read the article again. Right now you have down the questions, right? So you know that like what would be important to the SAT, and then you can read the passage again, see what kind of sentence you should pay more attention to. Why? Because firstly, that's important for your understanding to the whole idea, the whole story, and the characters. And why that's important? Because it was asked later. It is asked later in the article, in the questions, maybe because they signify very strong logic, right? Or something like, right, the attitude, the emotion kind of question. So you identify their sentence as well. See if you can be more sensitive, right? Have a more discerning eyes to be able to pay attention, identify those more important things. Perspective as well, right? Think about that perspective. That's also very important. You need to be able to identify that. So yeah, when you read the article, right, you need to actively, there's a lot of things to think, to process, rather than just passively read for pleasure. That's not what you're doing for the literature, for the science, or for SAT question, for the SAT reading. You need to make sure you're in the mode that like your brain is working 200%, right? It's highly active. It's like a computer. That's what you need to do. Like when you say she, well, who is she? Let me identify that, right? Is that sentence important? So you keep thinking a lot of questions, processing the information. That's what you need to do. All right. Any question for me? Okay. Do you get an idea, right? How to do this kind of literature article, right? So if you get an idea now, like more practice, right? More review first and then practice. So like I mentioned before, right? You go through that process first, and then like you practice the skill you learn to the new question, to the new passage. So it's definitely fine to do the past question, the past mistake, to review that. There's a lot of things you can learn from those things as well. All right. So it's not about how many new questions you do. It's about really, have you really learned something from those old things, like the practice, and then like improve, and then like apply that to the new practice. So definitely spend time on the thinking. All right, the thinking. Okay, that's for today. And the homework, you can practice the level 4. And for this week, and I can send you the level 3 as well. So I will send you the level 3 and level 4, so you can practice more the literature. In the end, right, hopefully, in general, literature will be, most of the time, it's actually easier. But the August test, this August, like the recent test, the literature is actually very hard. So we cannot predict that, which one will be like, will you have a like easy one or a hard one? But what we can prepare for is just, no matter how hard or easy it is, I know how to handle it. All right, so I have a set method. So I feel confident, right? What kind of like, I still be able to get most of the questions correct. That's what we need to do. No. So even some things you don't really fully understand, but you still be able to choose the best answer out of the 4 choices. That's important as well, right? Do you see that? Like, it's actually not that hard. Even you're not sure about the questions, but out of that 4 choices, you are able to find the best one. That's fine as well. All right, that's a skill. That's a technique. Right? So you want to get high scores, right? Like if you want to improve your results, like the capability, your ability, right? That's definitely important, but your skills is also important. So they help together. But if you only have the skills, you don't have the capability, that's not okay. Right? But you have the capability and you have the very good skills that will help you compensate. Your skills can compensate. Even your ability is not up to that level, but the skills can help you to still be able to get the right answer. That's also on what we are training for as well. But ideally, they improve together. Your understanding, right? Your reading comprehension, right? You understand better the article, right? You get more idea. So that's about your ability, and then like your skills, you know what you should focus on. So you read it more efficiently, effectively. And also come to the POA, process of elimination, right? You're more sensitive to those 40 answer. You understand, you get the wrong answer correct. That's also very important. All right, so we're training both things together. Another thing you can do is also like review the session 2. You still remember the grammar session. That's also very crucial, very important. The experience, again, like tell you that like, in order to get that high scores, you need to make 0 mistakes in the writing sessions. That's not easy, but that's doable. That's easier than getting 0 mistakes in the reading sessions, right? Way easier. So we need to aim for that as well. But so you can review before the intensive. If you haven't done the official guide, the past paper that I share with you, the folder, you just do that, right? Like I send you again, but you can do that. Like I can send you that Dropbox link again, so you can do some practice, the writing practice yourself. For example, on Saturday, right? You can practice that. Because what we're going to do on Sunday is like in the morning, we will have a mock. And then like after that, right after the morning session, we will talk about the paper. So think about that. You are going to have an SAT exams on this Sunday, that Sunday. So what are you going to do to prepare for that? Right. So of course, that will be the first time you have a real official mock, but yeah, see what you can do for that, right? You can prepare for that. Definitely still something you can do. That's for today. And yep, so see you Sunday then. Okay. Yep. Bye-bye. Okay, bye-bye, Vincent. Bye-bye.
You said for me to stay back.
Yeah, you stay here. All right, we'll just have a check. Have a chat. Yeah, bye-bye, Vincent.